Last Friday, American President Donald Trump signed an executive order putting a temporary ban on nationals from 7 predominantly Muslim countries from entering the U.S. When it came into effect hours later, it sparked confusion at airports around the world and impromptu protests in the U.S. and today in front of the American consulate in downtown Toronto. To help us better understand that opposition, we're joined tonight from Los Angeles, California by Jihad Turk, president of the Bayan Claremont Islamic Graduate School. And Mr. Turk, we're glad you could join us tonight from California. How's things going?
Things are going well, all things considered, that is. And thank you for having me on.
Not at all. Let's just set up our conversation with some of the latest so we can clarify what we understand to be the case as we sit here talking this evening. President Trump's executive order on immigration does 3 main things. It indefinitely bars Syrian refugees from entering the United States. It suspends the admission of all refugees for 120 days, and it blocks citizens of 7 countries, Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen, from entering the U.S. for 90 days. And let's just start with the obvious question, which is your reaction to this development.
Well, it's deeply troubling, in part because of the rhetoric in the run-up to the presidential election from, at that time, candidate Trump, who, to the wild cheers of his supporters, declared that he wanted to ban all Muslims from coming to the United States. And Rudy Giuliani was on Fox News yesterday declaring that this travel ban was something that he helped engineer when Trump said, how can we ban Muslims from coming to the United States legally, given that there's a First Amendment clause of freedom of religion. And so, it's part of the Constitution of the United States, the founding document, that we have freedom of religion. It's what we're built upon as a nation. It's part of our narrative and our very identity, the core of who we are. So these countries were selected really is a troubling indication of where things might be going, especially since he has surrounded himself with people who are known white supremacists and who are very deeply concerned with preserving a white majority in the United States, despite the trajectory of our increasing pluralist demographics of people of various ethnic backgrounds and races.
People you know from your graduate school, faculty or staff or students, do you know anybody who has been personally affected by this executive order?
Well, I also have served as the imam, or the religious director, at the largest and oldest mosque here in the Los Angeles area for many years. And I deal with a very large community, and yes, people who are part of the congregation, part of my community, have been affected deeply. I was spent yesterday on the phone with pro bono lawyers and the local senator here in California, Kamala Harris's office, and members of my community who are talking about family members, friends who are stuck in various parts of the world or here in LAX trying to return home, where they have either a visa or green card, legal residence here. And so we had a very busy day yesterday. Many of our congregants were down at the Los Angeles airport protesting the detention of those individuals. And so it's something that affects the lives of so many of our community. I'll just share one story. There was a Stanford University student who was detained, who's originally from Sudan and was on her way back. She was over there visiting family on vacation during the winter break, and she was held up in her return to her studies at Stanford University. So there are many such cases, and we're seeing some resolution to some of those with the clarification that was sent forth today, but it's still we're still uncertain with how this executive order will be implemented. And I'll say a little bit further, if I may, that what we're seeing now, and I'm hearing this from Muslim leaders and community organizers around the country, that there is an increased scrutiny of American citizens who are of Muslim heritage or who identify as Muslims when they return through border crossings and through airports.
I guess one of the things that many observers have noted is not only the 7 countries that are on the list, but one of the countries that is not on the list, namely Saudi Arabia, for example. noting 19 of the 20 9/11 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia, and yet they are not on the list. Any explanation in your mind as to why that's the case?
Well, many have speculated that the reason why these countries, not just Saudi Arabia, but a few other Gulf countries, where there actually were terrorists who took the lives of American citizens here in recent decades, why they weren't on the list is perhaps because Trump has business ties to some of those countries. So, you know, it's hard to crawl into the mind of this particular individual, but who knows what he's ultimately thinking. But the fact that he has not divested his properties and from his businesses is alarming. I mean, it really is. It's egregious and unconscionable. And we see some troubling indications in these early the selectivity of this executive order, something that might very well be an indication of, you know, how he might be trying to enrich himself personally through his office.
Jihad, let's do a little background here, because I suspect many Canadians have not heard of the Bayan Claremont Islamic Graduate School. So tell us a bit about it. What do you do there?
So we are the first Islamic graduate school that offers accredited master's degrees in Islamic studies and leadership. In other words, we're a seminary, graduate level. We're partnered with a Christian seminary, a Jewish seminary, a Buddhist university, and we are the first indigenous institution that's preparing American Muslim imams through accredited master's degrees to better serve the growing number of American Muslims. According to Pew in 2015, American Muslims make up 3.3 million individuals, 0.9%, almost 1% of the U.S. population. We have over 2,500 mosques, but less than half have a full-time imam, and 93% of those imams or religious leaders were born, raised, and educated abroad. So with the great diversity that we have of our community here in the United States, like you have in Toronto, we have Muslims at the mosque that I served as the imam of from over 80 different nationalities. And to be able to serve all of those constituents, those members of the community equally well, and also to make Islam relevant for American-born and raised Muslims, we thought it important to have an indigenous institution that really prepares the leaders to understand the American Muslim context and can help our community become civically engaged. Because part of the problem is we face two major challenges of the community. Number one is we face the stigma of Islam equals terrorism and all the negativity that's portrayed in the media about Islam and Muslims because of what's happening overseas primarily, whereas most American Muslims are law-abiding members of the community that contribute to the betterment of the society. So we have a stigma issue, and it paralyzes a lot of our community members from wanting to be proud to identify as Muslim Americans. So we want to have imams that can more effectively represent who we are as a community and what it is that we represent in terms of the values and how we contribute to the betterment of society. But also we have the challenge of making Islam relevant to our young people and having someone who understands the American Muslim mentality, who can help young people find purpose and be well adjusted in their dual identity of both American and Muslim, and be proud of that identity, and then help them navigate the difficult waters of today and develop a way forward that's constructive and contributes to the betterment of the society. That's something that we think is important, and that's what we're trying to produce through the leaders that we're graduating from our graduate school.
Understood. And Jihad, I hope you won't think I'm indulging in poor stereotyping here, but well, let me just put it out there. You don't look like any imam that I've seen before. I mean, look at the way you're dressed, listen to the way you speak. You obviously, English is obviously your first language. Arabic is not your first language. You don't have an accent of any kind. How come?
Well, I'm an American kid from Arizona. Yes, my name is Jihad, and that was my birth name given to me by my father when I was born in 1971. But my mom's from Oklahoma. She's Christian American, Caucasian. And, I grew up very well adjusted in my American identity. I was, good in sports growing up and popular in school. I was homecoming king of my high school. But when I began asking the big questions about life, I studied both Christianity and Islam, and I decided to follow the Islamic faith, and then went abroad and studied in seminary in places like Saudi Arabia and Iran, learned both Arabic and Farsi, and came back and was doing my graduate work in Islamic studies when I was recruited to serve as the imam here in Southern California. And what they told me was, when they approached me, they said, we want you to apply for this position of the religious director or imam at our mosque. I said, well, I'm going on to become an academic. And they said, well, you can continue doing that, but we also want you to serve as our imam because you can, having been born and raised here and grown up here in the States, you can better relate to our young people. And so I said, I'll give it a try, but it wasn't what I had intended to do starting out, and I found it very rewarding. And so that's why we ultimately created the graduate school, because we realized through the successes that we had here in Los Angeles that what we ultimately need is to have individuals who not only can teach the values of the faith, but can help our community contribute to the greater good of society through having this well-adjusted identity where we don't assimilate and lose our own uniqueness, and we don't isolate and keep to ourselves, but we integrate, and that we contribute to the beauty of the society in which we live by working across lines of religious distinction for issues of common concern, whether it's homelessness or poverty, civil liberties, as is in the case now. Because I have to say, it's really heartening, even with a name like Jihad, Palestinian-American background and heritage, to have been contacted by so many rabbis and pastors and civic leaders in the face of this bigotry, saying, how can we help? This is not the America that we stand for. We want to be with you as you're being singled out and maligned as a community. We want to stand with you in solidarity. It's been very heartening, I have to say. So even though President Trump is coming with those orders, let's keep in mind he was not popularly elected by the majority of the voters, nor the majority of the population. He's the least popular president at this phase of his presidency in recorded American history. So even though he has the power and he has the backing of both houses of Congress, we don't believe that he represents the true spirit of America. And I think that we see through the Women's March and through the rallies at airports now from your average American that we enjoy our position here as equal citizens in the United States, and we'll stand up together, united as a country against this order or any order that comes down that mistreats any minority community, ours or others.
Well, in our last couple of minutes, let me follow up on one more thing around this order. I think the Trump administration has taken pains to point out that this is not a ban on Muslims, this is their view, that it is rather a suspension, not a ban, but a suspension on people from those 7 countries in particular. That's the distinction they're making. What's your view of that distinction?
Well, again, I think that the rhetoric from the campaign was clear. He wanted to ban Muslims. That even though this is of limited order, 120 days, 90 days, whatever the order may be, it is perhaps a trial balloon to see how he's able to get away with doing this. And there's already talk about expanding the countries that are included in the order. So this is, I think, the first step down a road that can only increase in the scrutiny, the persecution even of the American Muslim community. I can't tell you how many people from the Japanese community here, Japanese American community, have reached out to me and they said, it all started for us when we were interned in World War II with these kinds of executive orders. So if there's a registry to register as a Muslim, we'll be the first ones to sign up with you. And rabbis, I was contacted even this morning by 3 different rabbis from 3 different denominations issuing statements and saying, we're here to stand in solidarity with you. We are very concerned because our parents, who are Holocaust survivors, tell us stories of what happened back in Germany that this is eerily reminiscent of. And so, we're paying attention. We're very concerned, and so we think that showing strong force now and an opposition to these measures can hopefully save us from going down the wrong path as a country.
Jihad Turk, we're grateful you could spare some time for us from California today for our viewers here on TVO. Thanks so much, and we appreciate your time very much.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.